Welcome. Is this on?
Yes.
You can hear me? All right. It's an honor to be here. I apologize for being late. I realized, I said, I drove from Michigan to Texas, and then I said, yeah, well, that was 20 years ago. So now I can't get from Aurora to Broomfield. Like I say, I'm honored to be here, but I will tell you it's a little bit disconcerting when you realize you're old enough to be history. Here it is, right? As your information tells, I was one of 627 women who served in Vietnam with the American Red Cross. The program was called Supplemental Recreational Activities Overseas. Not a real catchy term, right? So the GIs instantly brought back the term from World War II, Donut Dollies. However, I never served a single donut in Vietnam. We had, in the larger base camps, we had recreation centers, and our main job, however, was to go out into the field, night defensive position, jungle sites, signal mountain sites, wherever the GIs were out in the middle of nowhere and could not get into a base camp. The reason we did these programs was twofold. One, it was a way for two women to talk to up to maybe 125 men at a time. That's as many as we program to usually, or the maximum. And also to make everyone feel comfortable, because a lot of times the guys would go, wow, an American woman is coming, and then they'd go, wow, I haven't had a shower in 2 months, If it didn't rain, they didn't get washed. So this put everyone at ease, and it kept anyone from, monopolizing a conversation, or it kept anyone from being left out, because we could pull them all in. And I forgot to bring my rubber bands, doggone it. I was discombobulated. We have a rubber band game. You put it over this finger, maybe they have some here I can try afterwards, and over the thumb, and tell people they have to take it off without using their body or their other hand, nothing. And you'd be amazed how distracted people were for the length of time that it took to get that rubber band off their hand. A lot of this information will be in the film, so I'm going to tell you a little bit, just my story, how I got to be there. I found out I have a fellow alum from Wayne State University in Detroit, Lilly, a small world. It was the time I graduated from college in 1967, and it was the time that women's liberation, as it was called then, was coming into fruition. So many of the guys around me were fearing the draft. And I remember tutoring a friend who was terrified if he flunked in a class, I can't even remember what it was, that he would get drafted. He was a real little guy. All he kept saying is, I don't want to be a tunnel rat. And then I thought, well, gee, what about the guys who aren't even in college? Their lives are just as valuable. And I also thought it somehow didn't seem fair that if I flunked a course, what it meant was I'd have to deal with my parents. But for some of these guys, if they flunked out of college, it could literally mean life and death. Later on, when the lottery came into being, my brother actually was in college and he got drafted, but he got sent to Germany the same time as I was in Vietnam. So you just never know where the fates will send you. I had grown up on the east side of Detroit, was raised in a Catholic home and went 12 years of Catholic schools. And of course, Kennedy being our first Catholic president, which was a very big deal at the time, it rang a bell for me as well. So the old ask not what you can do for what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. And I think that was the motivator for a lot of the Red Cross women. And you'll see it, if not in this film, in another one that hopefully they'll be showing here at some point. I'm still discombobulated from my trip, excuse me. The other thing was, back to this draft thing, I felt that equal rights meant equal responsibilities. So I thought if I was going to stand up and say, yeah, women should be allowed to do this, this, and this, that I should maybe step up and do something toward our country or for our country. It's ironic that I might never have found the job had I not gotten really sick. I had a very bad upper respiratory infection, and I was on antibiotics and everything, and a friend brought me a stack of magazines that were quite expired, but they had an article in there about women in Vietnam. There was special services who ran the libraries. There was USO, of course. I used to be a ballet dancer, but that didn't sound real applicable for Vietnam. And then there was the Red Cross. So I figured the Red Cross would be the easiest to sell to my parents. So I applied for the job, and it wasn't just like you volunteered and you got to go. We were paid employees. I think our salary was about $5,800 a year, which at the time was not horrible. We weren't rich, but it wasn't horrible. And we had to apply for the job. And you could go to either Korea or Vietnam. And having lived in Michigan my whole life, I did not think I wanted to go to Korea. I'd had enough cold weather, and Vietnam was warm. And ironically, when I went to school at Wayne, as many of the students there did, I lived at home. So Vietnam, as was the case for many of our young soldiers, was my first trip away from home, first time to live away from home. So I had the double whammy there of both things. Couple instances that I remember in the, so I was going to tell you, I applied for the job, had to have 3 interviews. The 3rd interview, they flew me from Detroit out to a regional headquarters in St. Louis. And this was like late October, and I was just left in a holding pattern. And on Christmas Eve, if you can imagine, a telegram came, and it said that I had been accepted for the job in Vietnam. My parents were not really thrilled, kept trying to talk me out of it, and I didn't realize that there was some positive vibes there until my relatives started calling, and apparently they had told them that yes, I was going to do this. During the year I was in Vietnam, the family was wonderful in terms of sending letters, packages. I got involved with an orphanage over there. You can see the picture of the kids. I'm the tallest kid there in the blue. Not much taller than some of them. I remember this was across the bay from Cam Ranh, and we went there regularly once a week for several months. And at one point we took a water truck, and my mom and dad had a big collection at their church and sent a lot of supplies. The babies in this orphanage, just metal cribs, and there would be a little piece of foam, maybe this square and this thick, that came out of some packaging, and that's what the babies had for their beds. And then for medicine, as they called it, they used baby powder. So they were very ill-equipped. So one time we went and we took all these goodies in a water truck, gave all the kids showers and shampoos, and took toothbrushes and had them brush their teeth. Well, it was, quite frankly, a bloody mess because none of these children had ever brushed their teeth before. So they tended, to bleed as soon as they touched them. But it was quite a special day, and we ended up playing games with the kids, and it was a lot of fun. There's more instances I remember that I can tell you about after if there's time, but what I'd like to do is maybe turn this over, let you see the film, and then I'll be here for a Q&A all day long if you want. I'll tell you anything you want to know. Okay?
In fact, if you have any question, just ask while I'm getting this keyed up. Go ahead.
Oh, yeah. Does anyone have a question now? Go ahead.
You were visiting the GIs out where they were.
Right.
And were they well behaved?
Yes.
When they came,
Yes.
when you came to visit them?
Yes. Oh, very well behaved. And a lot of them sat there just like open mouth because it was a shock. I mean, they didn't know, and the word would be the round eyes are coming, the round eyes are coming, and no, perfect gentlemen. But I'll tell you, sometimes we were pretty young, a lot of us. I had just turned 22. Some of the women were a little bit older and had been actually teaching high school, which was close to the age of some of the GIs that were there. But they had things, and I don't want to get off color, but we're all adults here. Y'all gentlemen are familiar with P-tubes that you'd have around your site? No? Yes? P-tubes. That you urinate. Yes.
Right.
So I remember going by this, we were in a Jeep and going by this setting and waving and smiling at these guys who were using the P-tubes, and we didn't even realize it. In another case, there's a story to this gal, she's deceased now, she became a Navy JAG, but some, rumors flew all the time, of course, and well, here I'll address one thing first. Well, they just date officers. Well, what a lot of the younger guys didn't realize is the age that we were, and these young officers were the guys we'd been in college with. It was not anything enlisted don't work. I just visited a friend who married an enlisted guy she met over there. They got divorced, but anyway, they did get married. But that those were our peers. And I was going back. So this gal, Lizanne, she was dating an Australian fellow this was at Phan Rang. And so one of the young gentlemen there asked her, how much does it cost to take a Red Cross girl out? And Lizanne says to him, oh, not much. She says, Lofty and I usually just go down to the flight line and we'll get a burger, and then if there's a movie, we'll watch the movie. So it just doesn't cost very much at all. And the guy says to her, never mind, you're not one of them. Anything else right now? No? Okay. Yeah, I'm going to get my speed here. It's like I was so lost. Oh, yeah, I can just leave this here.
Yeah, just leave that here.
Yeah, and bring it back. So enjoy the
Go have
film.
a seat and enjoy it. We'll turn the light off here once we get going.
Oh, straight ahead.
Oh, here, I got it. You ready?
So just the
There we go.
Let me get the volume.
That chopper showed up, we had those blue uniforms, and we were that reminder of home. We came over the hill in the choppers, and there were women.
There's a chopper coming in. I looked up and I could see these light blue uniforms.
The Donut Dolly is the most unique woman you will ever meet. We were that reminder of home. Our jobs were smiles. Although we could make them smile, touch their hands, give them a whiff of perfume, we couldn't keep them alive. I went because I wanted to experience war from a woman's perspective.
All the Donut Dollies were angels in a combat zone. The war was like it was in black and white. When the Donut Dollies came, it was as if the world suddenly turned to color.
I flew to desolate fire bases filled with the tools of war and the men who used them. It was my job to perform the miracle of making the war disappear, however briefly, for boys who had been trained to kill. It was my mission to raise the morale of children who had grown old too soon watching
women's movement, we were a new generation, not content to step into the conventional roles. Instead, we took a new route away from the expected.
When I went, I was to graduate from college, get married, and have babies. I was black sheep. You're going where? You're going to do what? I wore a girdle and stockings when I went over. Pantyhose weren't around. Of course, we ditched it right after we got there, but that was beside the point. But the whole evolution of what the role of women was expected to be and expected to do was changing at that point.
It was the women's generation, time of changes for women, and I felt that if I wanted equal rights, that I should have equal responsibilities.
It was just as natural for me to want to serve my country and go to Vietnam as it would have been for any man to make a similar decision.
The Army invited the Red Cross Recreation Program to Vietnam, but each of us went for her own reason.
I went to Vietnam because of John F. Kennedy, so I'm a Kennedy kid.
Kennedy was assassinated on my 18th birthday, and he'd always asked what we could do for our country. I think I really took it to heart. I went to Vietnam in March of 1968. I think the basis for a lot of it was patriotism.
When I was in college, I was a war protester. I supported the men, I supported the troops, and I knew about this program, and I thought, you know, this is my chance to go and find out what's really happening so that I know for myself whether this war is right or wrong, whether the killing and dying should continue or not.
When I volunteered to go to Vietnam, I went because I wanted to experience war from a woman's perspective.
I told my parents I was going to join the American Red Cross, and they said, okay, you got to promise me you won't go to Vietnam. So off I went to Vietnam.
Then I called my parents and told them I was going. And my father just said, if you did this, well, this will be the biggest decision in your life. And it was.
From going to war, we learned the value of peace. From seeing so much death, we learned the gift of living.
As a woman, I had a real special reason that I wanted to go to Vietnam. When I was 19 years old, I became engaged to a young man who was a soldier stationed at Fort Hood, Texas. His name was David Ives. And shortly after we became engaged, he got orders for Vietnam with only 6 months left in the service. We went ahead and made plans to be married in November following his return, and we're looking forward to that. He was in Vietnam for 7 weeks and was killed in action on April 23rd, 1967. The last letter that he wrote, I still have. Wednesday afternoon, April the 19th, 1967. My darling Joyce, well, today is the day I find out if I've learned anything in this training. I had them take a picture of me this morning. Dig that crazy hat. They are the type of fatigues that we wear here in this unit. Sexy looking, don't you think? I hope the mail comes in before I leave. That would really make the next 5 days go a lot easier if I started it out by getting a letter from you right before I take off. I love you, I miss you so very much. Darling, I'll have to close for now. It's time to get ready and go. For now, goodbye, and may God bless and keep you. 4 years after I lost Dave, I had the opportunity to go to Vietnam in the Red Cross, and so I took that opportunity. There's no doubt that my perspective on being in Vietnam was different than most of those Red Cross girls who were there. You know, not every Red Cross girl had a Dave, but every Red Cross girl was there to help someone that had the same needs that he had.
I look at my pictures of them today and I see children, really 18-year-olds who had just arrived, and when I think of the hell they went through, it's unbelievable. And everybody world needs to understand what war is and what it does.
Those who've never been to war may not understand when those of us who have describe it in positive terms. It is not the war we speak of. It is the being alive. You are never so alive as you are when death is all around you. Every minute is a gift, and you live every minute.
The war was like it was in black and white, and the horror of the war, it was just devastating. And then if we were in the base camp and the Donut Dollies came, it was as if the war suddenly turned to color.
We'd left the real world, and we're now in the Nam. As I stepped off the plane, my first impression was that even the air smelled different. It was warm, humid, in the middle of the night, but I wrote simply, it smelled so oriental.
For the first month I was in Vietnam, I kept wondering, what the hell was I thinking? I mean, they flew us into Dong Tam, and it was just a dust bowl. There were no trees, there was nothing but, and hot.
It was either very very dusty or very muddy, and you could take your pick. If it rained, it was very muddy. If it seemed to dry quickly, and there was dust everywhere, and it was settled all over us.
See, a Red Cross girl is a person that starts out in the morning as a blonde and winds up in the afternoon as a redhead because of the blowing red mud. The wind blows all the time, and the helicopter blades keep the red mud stirring.
Idealism, the lure of adventure, and a minimal salary took us to Vietnam, but none of us really knew what we were getting into. We commuted in Huey helicopters, loaded in pairs between protective door gunners. Flying over the stunning beauty of Vietnam and the natural air conditioning of altitude was surely one of the great perks of the job.
It was exciting, and flying on helicopters all the time. I mean, you arrive on a fire base or an LZ, you go around and see the men. Some of them are happy to see you, and it's a real kick, and some of them are like, what is a woman doing here?
Every once in a while, we were fortunate to bring some Donut Dollies into some LZs. And it was just our standard procedure, and I must apologize to them now, that we always took the long way home because of that smell.
Whenever I smell Shalimar, I think of Vietnam, because we had it in the BX, we could buy it all the time, and one of the things we tried to do, no matter what, whether we could shower, whether we could have time to get ready, or just had to leave in a hurry, no matter what, part of your uniform was perfume. You wore that all the time, because it meant so much to the guys.
The smell permeated the aircraft, and it was a lot different than most of the smells we had during the day. So that smell was one of the things that just really sticks in my mind.
Of course, the 1st Infantry Division is known as being first with things, so they wanted to have the first American Red Cross women in Vietnam. There were 4 of us girls, and 2 were to go out in a helicopter each day to one of the forward areas, and 2 of us would stay back. So we worked 7 days a week.
The Red Cross was what was known as a close military support group. In other words, the women were issued orders. We answered chain of command. We filed triplicates and multiple papers like anybody else did every month for the military. We were issued fatigues and boots when we went in. We also had our Red Cross uniforms, and we preferred to wear those.
There were 627 of us who served mostly year-long tours in country. By the time the last of the 27 units shut its doors in Bien Hoa in 1972, we'd averaged 17,000 air miles monthly for a grand total of 2,125,000. If it flew and had room for 2 donuts and a program, you can bet we took it.
I mean, we came over the hill in the choppers, and there were women.
Most of the time you go in, you got soldiers just milling around, or you're going to pick them up. Well, when Donut Dollies comes in, it's kind of like they actually comb their hair. They actually put on, some of them put on shirts.
First time I saw the Donut Dollies, I distinctly remember going like, what the hell are these women doing here? Did someone tell them we have a war going on?
And I was out digging a hole, and somebody hollered there's a chopper coming in, and I looked up and I could see these light blue uniforms, and everybody got excited, you know, the Donut Dollies, you know, and we'd never had the opportunity to see them.
They'd start pointing, the Donut Dollies are here, here comes the round eyes. And so that would be our welcome.
They had landed, and the girls were out, and we started receiving mortar fire. She saw me, and she came towards me, and I grabbed her by the arm, and we bailed off in the hole that I was trying to clean out. I put her up in the corner of the hole, and she had brown mud all over her clean light blue uniform, and she was crying. I'm the first American woman I had seen since I had gotten there. You know, I was worried about her, but I was glad to see her. I remember thinking, well, you know, it might be a good way to die.
We came to expect the concertina wire fences, the mountains of sandbags, the charged air of bunkers, all so out of place in this beautiful country, but then so were we.
We'd go out to those operational areas in those little light blue dresses, and here was everyone around us with helmets on and flak jackets, and we were standing there in those little light blue dresses.
Anybody that was there had themselves at risk. Just because they weren't wearing uniforms, except nice powder blue ones, doesn't mean that they weren't part of us. They weren't a soldier in the war.
The military understood the value of this morale program, especially in their forward areas, fire support bases, and landing zones. If we were there in those powder blue uniforms with our games and conversations, then it must be safe.
February 1966, I was with what we call a division forward operation. The radio operator came over to me and said Danger 6 was coming in. That's the CG, you know, General Seaman. So when they pulled in and touched down, and the door opened, and Danger 6 was loaded with bras.
He opened the door, and I started to step out, and I think I had one foot out when these big hands reached around my waist and literally threw me back into the helicopter and started screaming at the pilot.
I said to the pilot, you know, there's a firefight in here. What the hell are you doing in here with these women? Get out of here. I later got a call, and the radio told me, he said, Danger 6, you know, General Seaman, and wanted me to meet him at the helicopter. He got off, walked off to the side and said that the Red Cross women that you just ran off from up here are here by my invitation, and I sent them out here to see what was going on my helicopter. And I said, well, I said, all right, sir. I said, but you know, it's not a good place to have women. He said, I've already told you that the decision's been made, Sergeant Major, and that's the way it is. I said, yes, sir.
I think a Red Cross girl has to be a person who loves her country because she's among men who love their country and who are giving the ultimate sacrifice.
A Donut Dolly is the most unique woman you will ever meet.
A Donut Dolly could do something, had a can-do spirit.
She's a kindergarten teacher, psychologist, mother,
Sister, girlfriend, friend.
My job was ultimately to make people smile and take their mind off the war and the fact that tomorrow might not come for them.
A Donut Dolly is a young, naive person who volunteers to go to a foreign country not really knowing what she's going to get into.
It was go out and just pretend as if nothing was wrong. I mean, our jobs were smiles.
smile, 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 smile. And sometimes you had to smile when it was just gruesome.
And a lot of times you'd go back to a unit that you knew and there were missing people. Or you'd walk by a bunker that was still smoldering from a direct hit, but you still had to smile. You couldn't let them see how upset you were.
So sometimes when all you could do to comfort them was smile, that's what you did.
And so we literally had only our smiles, our bag of tricks, as we used to call it, which the bag of tricks was just games that we had made up, and that's how we went to war.
At times, the smiles were hard to pull from them, but that didn't stop us from trying.
Sometimes our job was to get their minds off of things, and that's where that program came in, supplemental recreational activities overseas. That recreation was a way to say, hey, forget about yesterday. Forget about that you lost your buddy next to you. Let me help you forget about that.
Our workplace was furnished with piles of sandbags and staffed by shirtless patriots. Sometimes it got to us, the heat, the dust, the mud, the endless need to smile until our cheeks hurt. But we always knew that compared to them, our job was nothing. We were visitors in this war. They were its residents.
You know, some days I didn't feel like smiling, but whatever I had gone through was not as much as what they had gone through. I called it my Eleanor Rigby face that I kept in the jar by the door for all the lonely people. Got up in the morning, put my Donut Dolly uniform on, put my pins on, put my smile on. And it's amazing what you can smile through.
We wore powder blue dresses and carried bags filled with diversions, rubber bands to twist, ropes to tug, and game show trivia contests. When the Donut Dollies were in the LZ, Vietnam became like summer camp with mortars.
And then we would divide them into teams. Nothing like competition between those 19-year-old kids to get them roused. And then we would ask questions. We would make the programs about things that reminded them of home, cars.
The twisted nail puzzle. We had the little rubber band trick that we liked to do where we put it on their hand and they had to get it off without using the other hand.
Music, movies, those things that were symbols of home for them. And then for a little while, they were at the racetrack, or they were watching a movie. They were playing games.
It didn't matter what was in the bag. It didn't matter what songs they played. They took us out of that war.
And to see a smile on their faces, to see them laugh, genuinely laugh. It was just so touching. And because death was so close, the good times were better, the funny things were funnier.
And laughter was one of those things that can really join people together. And when the Donut Dollies were there was always lots of laughter. You know, it didn't really matter what anybody said, you could still laugh at it. And it was that laughing that was part of the healing that we were going through while they were there.
Aware that the men hadn't seen an American woman for months, we knew we were beautiful to them, even if we didn't always feel that way ourselves.
Why I
came is because I wanted to get out on the ground floor on something that I consider very important.
Well, drink up, I'll get you some more.
Besides circus-like tents, we poured liquid from tin buckets. Sorry, GI, nothing stronger than Kool-Aid here. The harsh reality of our job was that, although we could make them smile, touch their hands, give them a whiff of perfume, we couldn't do the one thing we most desperately wanted to do. We couldn't keep them alive.
One of the most difficult experiences that I had over and over and over was to go out and see these guys in the field and then get on a chopper and go back to the relative safety of the base camp and have to leave them there. I wanted to say, come on, get on, you can come too. You know, that was hard to know that I'd be in a better place and that they'd be out there. And who knew if they'd still be there tomorrow.
Sometimes we served chow at lunch lines in the field.
The guys would be just walking along with their heads down and, you know, sliding their tray along and just not real interested in the whole process. And he'd say, "Hi, where are you from?" And they'd be, you know, their heads would come up and they'd just be totally shocked and happy and thrilled. And they'd walk off the end of the chow line with a big smile on their face.
And we had a fairly new girl. Well, she and I were working, and also on top of a mountain somewhere at this fire base, serving lunch. She was on my left with these two types of potatoes, and the guys would come through, and you always wanted to speak to everyone. And I began to hear her repeating kind of the same phrase over and over again about these potatoes. She was offering them a choice, although they could have had both. The way she phrased her choice, and she kept saying it over and over again without a break. Mashed or baked, mashed or baked, mashed or baked, mashed or baked. And the faster she said it, the more she said it, I thought, oh my God, this sounds exactly like a word we don't want to be talking about at lunch, especially at Donut Dolly. And finally, I looked over at her and I said, why don't you move down to the end of the line and serve something else?
As young women in Vietnam, we were acutely aware of the Vietnamese children, those caught in the crosshairs. In some ways, we knew what became of our GIs, but we'll never know what became of the innocent children who grew up in the horrors of that war. Sometimes they wanted us to hold their weapons as if by doing so we'd see only boys with their toys, not men carrying the tools of death. We obliged them.
I pulled the trigger and those fools had put it on rock and roll. I had no control of it. I feel like I didn't kill one of them. And because I had a death grip on the gun, you know, my finger was still on the trigger. I went through the whole magazine, you know. What were you thinking?
Who knew how important it would be for me to remember them, as if I could keep each one alive by the simple fact of knowing he existed.
I was to tell fortunes. So I dressed up like a gypsy, and we looked out there, and there was a line of about 100 men waiting to have their fortunes told. And I had beefed up the night before a little bit, you know, with some research, and learned about lifelines and children and things like that. But you know what? Every one of those guys, they came and sat down in front of me, and they put their hand out. and I touched their hands. I touched every one of those guys' hands, and sometimes I would make up stuff, you know. Sometimes they really did have long lifelines. Sometimes they had the 2 children or 3 children. But that was unique for them. That was an opportunity for them to look at a round eye and have that touch, literally, of home.
A couple of soldiers had come into the recreation center together, and one had decided he wanted to shoot pool, and he just disappeared around the corner off to have a good time with some buddies, and the other stayed and chatted with me, and he was telling me about his dreams and hopes for when he got back to the world. And we had a wonderful conversation, and 2 days later the fellow that I talked to came back in the rec center, and I was still there. And he came in and he said, "Do you remember my buddy who came in with me?" And I knew it was important. I tried to remember what he looked like. And we saw hundreds of fellows a day, sometimes thousands. I remembered a sandy color of hair. Once I knew I could tell the soldier that, yes, I did remember his friend. He told me that they had been walking on patrol the previous morning, and his friend had been walking point. And he stepped on a landmine, and he had literally, totally disappeared. He said we couldn't find him. I just felt this gulf between us, between his experience and my experience, and how could I say what I needed to say, what was important to say to let him know how much I cared. And I think that was the most frustrating part for me, was wanting to understand and knowing I could never understand what those men were going through in combat.
Many days we went from the fire bases and back to the hospital, where heroic nurses tended to wounded. The wards were arranged so the mildest injuries were set up the farthest from the OR. As we laughed, talked, and walked our way closer, the wards grew darker and quieter.
We never went into a ward without talking to every man in the ward. So you just go from bed to bed, talk to them. "Hi, I'm Nancy, where are you from?" And you'd hope that you could start a conversation from that. And you learn to only look at their face, at their eyes.
When you were in a rear area, you had to do whatever someone asked you to do. And sometimes that happened to be grave restoration. I can't talk about that.
But it doesn't take very long for a Red Cross girl to be in Vietnam before it is personal. It's very personal when you've had someone come in and touch their hand, or you've given that cup of Kool-Aid to somebody, and then a week later you found out the guy's gone. You know, you might have been the last female face or touch of home that that person had. You know, we don't know if the guy got the letter from his girlfriend that day before he had to go out on that mission. But he might have seen a Red Cross girl.
I left Vietnam, but truth be told, it hasn't left me. Triggered occasionally by the most ordinary sight, sound, or smell, I am instantly transported there, however briefly. And in this, I'm not alone. It was a year in our lives that would affect each of us forever. Affect us differently, but affect us. And almost 40 years later, we got together to share our memories and play the games and honor all that we'd lost and gained in the Vietnam War. We are sisters in a bond of shared experience. It is great to be together.
It's a sisterhood. It's a sisterhood. It's our own little group. This is our time.
I knew I was home when I saw blue. Look, blue, blue, blue. I knew I was home. It was absolutely wonderful to be here with these girls. I got it. Don't in front of me.
We've all had stories inside us that nobody could understand except Donut Dollies. And it was so good for us to get together and laugh at some of the things that happened just because we were women in a war zone.
Welcome to New Mexico, welcome to our home, and welcome home.
Charlie's playing games again, incoming. Red wine, wine, red cigarettes, and drink.
Love you, ladies. Love you. Come on, welcome home.
The opportunity to hear other veterans and to be greeted and hugged by veterans is something that means the world to a Red Cross girl.
All these years later, we were once again welcomed by veterans into their landing zone. Only this time, there were no mortars. Together, we celebrated our unique shared moment of history.
Once a Donut Dolly, always a Donut Dolly. It just never left.
She tied me up.
35 years later, playing the games again with veterans was like riding a bicycle. Once you've done it a few times, you never forget how.
It was funny to be in the as part of the audience 30 years later when the Donut Dollies are putting on a program, playing things like the smell game, where they put disgusting odors under each man's nose and they had to guess what they were. It was a good time. The guys enjoyed it. They were all pretty good sports, just like they were in Nam.
And when you look at these women assembled here, do you see 60-year-old women or do you see 20-something girls? How good is your eyesight?
I see one girl, 22 years old.
I see 20-something women. I see 20-some hotties.
And they're all winners! Let's hear it for our team!
Hey, this is a sign of peace. It was a sign that you saw in Vietnam all the time. When we'd be walking down the road and truckloads of men would go by, it was peace, peace. There were special songs that would bring in peace. When I was in Angel Fire, I believe that all of us felt that again.
Angel Fire was a place I had always wanted to go. I had heard so much about it, about how peaceful it was, how healing it was. Everybody that I've ever talked to that went there has said how good it made them feel. So I was really looking forward to the trip.
Where have all the young men gone? Long time ago. Where have all the young men gone? All the soldiers, everyone. When will they
For the first part of the trip, we were celebrating all that we had gained from Vietnam. All the strength, the inner strength, the ability to laugh through the tears, But I think as we got closer there, we all started reflecting on things that we lost.
And as we were getting closer and closer to the place, we realized that there was a big red cross that they had put out on the side of the hill, and that was their welcome to us. And that was just really very appreciated, very touching, very moving.
Inda bayat ehi holonigi ekea do bedanat ai shitn lingo bahanana si.
The medevac helicopter flew over, and I was reminded of Dave and how it might have been for his patrol. I think because of that, Angel Fire was a wonderful experience for me.
Sweetest sound in the world. It just says they love you. I know you love you. Sweetest sound in the world.
Over American mountains, I drift back to Vietnam. There's no artillery, no fire base, no bags of games in my hand. But the GIs are here with us, every one of them.
There was a Huey helicopter. That's, of course, one of the great symbols of the Vietnam War. And to be in such close proximity to a Huey, to be able to touch it and feel all the memories of flying in the Huey, the memories of dropping out of the sky into a fire base. It was very powerful.
The Hueys came in, and I had never experienced the thud of a body being thrown out and onto the ground in a green bag. And it just, you can hear, I see the chopper, I hear that thump, thump. It's just dead weight being thrown out. There was just something about seeing the chopper, and I heard that thud. I knew. I was back in that moment. I was standing there hearing the bags come off.
Felt like the spirits of those I'd lost in Nam were there. And I couldn't think of anybody I would rather be with when I was feeling that than with my sisters. Stacy.
Tell me better.
He was a chopper pilot, and he had a guitar too. I finally had something that made me feel comfortable, and just like that, it was gone. And I guess for me that was sudden war reality. Dodging mortars was one thing, but now my friend was dead. And I started flipping through, and I found this picture, and it tore my heart out. I didn't have a picture of him. I never had a picture of him. And it gave me a picture to put in my head of him when we were playing guitars and singing.
Vietnam War Red Cross girls are a fortunate few. We did something when we were young that mattered.
The best days sometimes were the little notes that were left on tables. When somebody said, "Thank you for being here." It was a smile on a GI.
I'm sure that the Donut Dollies will never fully understand how much what they did meant to the guys out in the field. We can all be proud of the fact that we made a difference in the lives of soldiers fighting the war, and probably will never understand how much good we really did.
But all the Donut Dollies were angels in a combat zone. And we can never, even begin to repay them for what they did for us.
Today, more than 155,000 American women have been deployed to Iraq and Afghanistan, flying helicopters, commanding units, and fighting and dying in combat. No one questions their ability to handle the pressures of war, and that is due in some part to us. We went to war in powder blue, and now women go in uniform. We are proud.
It was the best thing I ever did with my life, and I would do it all over again.
I think because of my experience in Vietnam, it gives me a little different perspective. When I see that name of that soldier who died, I think, maybe this guy had a 19-year-old fiance. There's a mother who has lost a son. There is a father who has lost a son. There is a sister who's lost a brother. I'm reminded. We all need to be more mindful about the fact that every time a person is lost, is killed in war, it affects so many people.
Like the war itself, the reunion is behind us. It is time once again to return to the real world. We have lived lifetimes since our year in Vietnam. We are grandmothers now, no longer the young girls that look out from our wartime photographs. But no matter how many years pass by, there is that long ago year in Vietnam that will never, ever leave us. We will never forget. For veterans, certain sights, smells, and sound bring back the war in an instant.
Hello, I'm Camilla, and I'm from Atlanta, and I do know how to say 5. What does that mean? They always would say, can you say 5? And I'd say 5. Say spider. I say spider, and they just go, wow, they love it.
Okay, now, no. Now put your hands behind your back. No, come on. On your knees. On your knees. There you go. Now, knock it over. Your nose. Come on, be a woman, Mark.
First of all, I want him to say that I made a mistake by saying you didn't belong there, because you proved me wrong, And you prove that over and over again. And so I'd like to apologize to all of you for saying that. And I just would like to thank you for your service in Vietnam and other wars.
Take the chair up. Stand up.
I love them all. Well, I thought when I first got in the country that I'd be diving into a foxhole, and the first thing I saw was a Donut Dolly giving out Kool-Aid, and I thought, wow, this is wonderful. How could they do this?
Not everybody got to see a Donut Dolly, but those of us that did were the lucky ones. Thank you. You're welcome.
Well, that was certainly a marvelous video you all put together. When was that show? Or your gathering?
It was filmed about 11.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. That was filmed, I think, somewhere around 11 years ago. That honestly was not our first reunion, though. When the Vietnam Women's Memorial was dedicated, we had a grand reunion. I remembered going with another gal who's in that film to book a hotel. So we debated, you had this size room or this size room, what's going to happen? Well, we took a chance and booked the big room, and we had 350 people there, including the relatives of those women who were killed. So that was pretty amazing. I haven't watched this for a long time. It got to me. Whoa. But amazing things that some of the women did. And they were in there. I almost wanted to point them out, and I said, no, don't interrupt the movie. We had a one-star general, an Army general, a bird colonel, and a light colonel in the Air Force, 2 women who were CIA operatives for their entire careers. They were sisters. Another woman, she was on the chopper. You'd be hard to remember, but there were 2 gals. One had glasses, and the others, both big smiles, of course. And she was one of the first 6 Secret Service agents. Her name is Holly Huffschmidt. So a lot of them ended up doing pretty amazing things. So I'm pretty proud of them. Any questions?
I noticed the Donut Dollies were prettier than the round eyes in Thailand.
Oh, is that right? Well, thank you. Thank you. Anything else? Any questions?
Are there any Donut Dollies that have been diagnosed or suffer from PTSD?
Yeah, but not diagnosed. But it's true. But we don't get, the military benefits or that, so. And, sometimes it's a matter of, it's a balancing act, the hanging on and the letting go. I mean, I think of one woman in particular, she still lives this every single day. And a lot of us who were stationed with her are really not quite sure why, because we went through the same traumas with her that were not all that traumatic. Let's put it that way, and I don't mean to knock her, but she obsesses with it. And we've been concerned about her and done all we can, but what can you do? But yeah, some of the women did have had issues, but I think most of them worked through them. I was lucky. I got involved a long time ago. We had a VBA chapter in my hometown, and it was really funny because when the guys all showed up, it was like walking wounded, and I kind of became the Donut Dolly again. And whenever, this was in Battle Creek, Michigan, VVA Chapter 313, and I was one of the charter members, which you're not allowed to do, to sign the charter, because I was a civilian. And one of their favorite things to say was, "Shut up, Barb." And they always have me, I'd be doing things, and they say, "No, shut up, Barb. This is the way it is, and yeah, you're going to sign it. You're one of us." So I was lucky. I had those guys, and it was interesting because every time something came up in the city, like they had what they called a paint blitz, so I got the guys, I always took the lead and got the guys to get involved in that, and they asked for the home of either a veteran or the widow of a veteran, and then they made a relationship with that person, and they would go back and do repairs and things, you know, for years after that. And the next year, one of the guys would stand up and chair it. So it was really cool just to watch them grow from being still semi-traumatized to a real civic organization that was good for each other and good for the community.
Yes, I happened to notice that some of the women at the unit patches, did they just kind of collect those as they went to various base camps?
That was part of our uniform. We were to wear the patch of the unit to which we were assigned.
Oh, okay. I saw here toward the end you had some with the 9th Infantry unit patch.
Yep.
They were referred to as a friend of mine who was with the 5th Special Forces. He said they used to call the 9th Infantry the Donut Dollies. Because if you look at the 9th Infantry unit patch...
Oh, it looks like a... You're right, it looks like a donut. Yeah.
My brother was with the 9th.
Okay.
And I was kind of, when he said that, I was somewhat offended, but then, that was initially, but then later on I kind of understood, you know, this is the kind of thing you guys did.
Yeah, it's like gallows humor if you're an ambulance driver or something. You do what you have to do just to survive. I will tell you a sad note. Emily, the one who had the weapon, she passed away 2 months ago. But it was on sometime during the Monday night, and on that Sunday, she lived in Wisconsin. I called her on that Sunday and spent an hour on the phone with her, talking and laughing and having a wonderful time. And I said to her, she had COPD, and I said, Emily, I said, is this wearing you out? Should I let you go? And she said, no, it's rather invigorating to talk with someone who really cares about me. So that was good. And she did most of her time at the 9th. Most of the time she was there, she was with the 9th.
Did they ever Agent Orange? But they were never in the area.
This is interesting. We don't really know because nobody has ever done a study, and they've done a big women's study. But I even approached them about, studying the Red Cross girls because we knew where we were. And the women who were in Vietnam were primarily in base camps, but we went out to the NDPs that had maybe been exfoliated. So if anybody would have been exposed as women, we would have been as exposed as the guys were. But we were told, or I was told, no, this is for military women, but, you can read it when we complete it. And it was funny. Has anyone ever heard of General Wilma Vaught? She founded the Women's Memorial in Arlington, and I was on a panel with General Vaught. It was during the dedication week for the Women's Memorial, and she looked over at me and she said, I resented you. And I mean, coming from, a general, I was just shocked. She said, I was a major and I could not leave the base camp. She said, and there you Red Cross girls were all over the country. So when she said that, I have that on video, so I was pretty amazed by that whole thing. Someone? There were a lot of...
Were the 4 or 5 ladies that were killed, were they killed over there or they died in Ventura Cross?
No, they were killed there. One had Guillain-Barré, you know what that is? Guillain, they pronounce it Guillain or Guillain-Barré. It's a disease, and it paralyzes you from your feet on up until your lungs just don't work anymore. And we had heard she had died from a mysterious virus, and then we found out in later years that that's what it was. Another girl, tragic accident, they were in a base camp, and the pin was not in the seat for the Jeep, and they went around the corner too fast, and she got flipped out of the Jeep and landed and got a brainstem injury and died. Just freak, And then a really sad one, the young lady was stabbed to death in her bed by a GI who'd gone berserk, and she did not know him. She'd only been in country like 2 months, and he just was there, and lost it and went in and stabbed her to death. So that was sad. And then there's a fourth gal that was not mentioned on there. She had finished her tour with the Red Cross, and she stayed on with the government, the DOD, some kind of a job. And she was on Operation Baby Lift, the one that crashed. So she died in that. So there were 4. And there were 2, I believe, field directors, 2 Red Cross field directors who were killed.
Well, Barbara, thank you so much for joining us. And we want to give you just one of our Museum Challenge coins.
Thank you.
For being with us today.
Thank you. This was really an honor, and I had not watched that for a long time, and seeing, what became of those women. Oh, and another one I forgot, we had a DEA agent, so we always kind of stretched out in different directions. Thank you for coming, and thank you for caring.
Did you want to mention something about your...
Oh. I brought a book for the museum, A Piece of My Heart by Keith Walker. And Keith was a Korean vet. I have no idea if he's still alive or what's going on with him. But during the Chicago parade that I was fortunate enough to attend, Keith walked in the parade with the women, and he was with the Donut Dollies. I walked with him in the parade. And he said that was the first time he'd done anything to acknowledge his service in the military in Korea. But this is a book about 26 women. There is a Red Cross girl in here, but it's people you don't even think about. For example, there's a flight attendant in here. Who thinks about that? But they had to put those guys off the plane, and know they might never make it home. So that was not a glamour job at that point. That was a tough job too.
Well, thank you so much again, and please stick around and talk with Barbara some more, and help us with our donuts in the back. Yes. Oh, yes.
I'm Neil Stanley. I was a medic in Vietnam and on a medevac helicopter at the 91st Attack Hospital in Phuliwa. One of our favorite duties was taking the Donut Dollies out to the fire bases. We'd take them out there, drop them off, just like what was in the film. And they'd say, okay, come back and pick us up at 2 hours later, 3 hours later, whatever. And sometimes we were too busy going picking up patients and we'd have to get delayed a little bit. But anyway, it was a wonderful sidelight having the Donut Dollies, picking them out and picking them back up.
Neil, I might mention, for years has been a volunteer at the wall in D.C. for the National Park Service.
Yeah, I've done that for the last 10 years, something like that. And there's like, I don't know how many of them, 50 odd volunteers with no requirement for any of us to be at the wall. So many days a week, so many days a year, so many hours a day. It's just 100% voluntary. On the big holidays, Memorial Day, Veterans Day, weekends, there's usually 80-90% of the volunteers are there. If you go Tuesday morning and it's raining, it won't be and let them do live close to D.C. And but we've got one woman that lives in Hawaii, one woman that lives in Alaska, and so we just go we wear yellow shirts and yellow caps. If you remember the wall, you've seen us. We just stand there and we've got the book of names, and we let visitors find names, and we do name rubbings all day long, and it's very rewarding for me. And four of my buddies that are in our unit are on the wall. Their chopper just appeared on a night mission, and they're still all 4 in my unit. The chopper was found like 4 years later. But it's been nothing but the side of the 4 guys covered. Anyway, that's the reason I became a volunteer at the wall. Just trying to get back to those 4 kids.
I have a quick question. Did anyone besides Neil see a Donut Dolly in Vietnam? You did. John Thompson, he's the president of the 101st chapter in the area. So I think he should be a future speaker. I'm volunteering, John.
You all know that Bill Humphrey, who's one of the founders of the museum, passed away about 2 weeks ago. His memorial service will be on the 28th of September, 2 o'clock, at the Avenue Apartments, which is just off of Lowell. And it's informal. I never heard of an informal memorial service, but this is an informal. And of course, in addition to being the founder of the museum, for our friend Tom James, he was also a Rotarian involved with our club. So, and also
Thank you again.